is a one which is mostly being used, and whatever we'll be designing, right, will be completely based on this, right? But anyways, how we'll be getting the databases is like this, like so we'll be getting databases in the form of jar files, right? Jar is nothing but a Java archive, right? So we'll be getting the things in Java archive way. One sec. Hello? Sorry. Yeah, so we'll be getting all these things in a form of jar file, which is nothing but a Java archive, right? So we'll be checking out how it will be. So this Java archive is nothing but an API form which consists of all the classes, right? So internally it will be, everything will be in a form of normal Java classes, right? So all those Java classes will be packaged into something called jar, and that jar will be provided over the internet so that you can download the jar and we can use this jar. So this jar will contain classes within some packages, right? So all these things will be inside some packages, right? So what we'll be doing is, so whenever we said the first statement, which is load driver or loading driver, right? So what we'll be doing is, here when we just were saying about application, and we said JDBC API, and we said we have to get the driver of certain database and we have to load it, right? So that is what we were talking about. So here what is happening is, how to load driver is a question here, right? Because we have seen different types of driver, now we know which type of driver we will be using. And yes, as Jami was mentioning yesterday, so whatever you are getting on web, mostly we will be finding a type 4 driver, right, which consists of classes which are completely written on Java, right? Now if you want to use any of the driver into the program, right, the first step what we did is, it was to load a driver. Now how can we load a driver is, so you have something called a token called class. This class is different from the class we use. In order to define a container called class, which we used to do, so that is small c. So the regular way of defining class, we define using small c class, right? But here I'm talking about a capital C class. So this class is mainly used to load the external classes or packages into our current class. Now we already have seen something called import, right? So what does import do? Import is something which will import the classes. Let us say if I'm creating any object of some other class, and some other class is in some other package, right? What happens whenever we create an object of let us say A package is in one package, A class is in one package, and B class is in some other package, right? So when I create an object of B in A, what happens? So it will import the package. The import is nothing but, it is actually getting access to the package, and then we are able to create the object of B. In the same way, class is something which is used to import the classes of the jar file, which is a driver. Now how does we do that is, we have something called class dot for name. This is a direct way to do or to load a driver. Now inside this, what we'll be doing is, we'll be just mentioning the string, and that string is nothing but the package path and the class. Now let us say if you want to load some Oracle driver, right? So then we'll be defining in this way, the Oracle dot, we have something called JDBC, let us say, dot driver dot Oracle. So this is a form, this is a straightforward form which Oracle provides in order to load a driver, right? So this is nothing but, whenever you import your jar, which is Oracle jar, let us say Oracle jar, right? Then if you call this means this jar contains this package and the class arc, right? So once you mention this and just say semicolon, there is a single statement, right, which will create something called driver manager in Java. This driver manager is nothing but a direct class in Java. I have just created a program. I'll just show you that. So you can see here in a debug mode also, which we have already seen this. Okay. So this is a sample program in which, so I've written a step-by-step thing. So see, you can see this. So as I said, we'll be just using this to connect a SQL server, right? So I just took the connection string, and don't worry, because these connection strings are something which you'll be getting from vendor. You don't have to remember them, right? You'll be getting all the type of driver loading connection, all the driver loading strings from internet, right? Or more specifically, you'll be getting these from vendor sites. If you're going to use SQL Server, you'll be getting it from maybe Microsoft site, right? In that way, you'll be getting it. Now here you can see I wrote something called class. So you can see class C. This is a class definition, and this is something else, right? This class is nothing but it's a bigger entity which is used to load your driver into this. Now you can see here I was talking about the jar, right? I'll just show you that. Now you can see here when I go to WebINF, I haven't created anything, but for now I'll just show you the jar. Now you can see here there is a jar called SQL JDBC 4 jar, right? Or ODBC jar, right? So this is a jar which is being provided by the third-party vendor. We just copied the jar into here, and we have to copy inside your lib folder. Lib is nothing but a libraries folder. When you copy this, which means automatically this jar will come under this project umbrella. Now whenever you just call that class, now here you can see till this part is a package. They said com.microsoft.sql server.jdbc package. Internally it is this, there's something called SQL Server driver. So this is the way how you load a driver, and this is the same way to load the driver of any type of database. There is no other way, right? This is the only way. Now where actually you are assigning the driver manager, you are nowhere doing that. But what happens internally is whenever you call any database API method, right, internally this class will make your driver manager class ready. So this driver manager will be ready, which means, as you have seen on that day, right, your JDBC is now is now completely tagged to your driver, which means driver is loaded into our JDBC. Under the JDBC you have your driver class. Now you can see here your driver manager is again under your SQL, right? Your driver manager is a direct class, right? So that is a driver manager which will be automatically loaded whenever you create a class.forName with a string. So this is how you do something called load a driver, right? That is how we load a driver. Now once we are done with loading a driver, which means, let me just redraw this so that we'll go in step by step way again, right? Now, so we have seen something called, we had an app, we had a database, right? So yeah, so this is your JDBC and your driver is loaded. Now which means whenever you say class.forName and load it, right, so it will be loaded into our app. This is my Java application. Now which means once I am done with my loading, which means my driver manager is ready. Driver manager is something which is the base component for the whole communication. Unless your driver manager is active, you can do the communication part, otherwise you can't do that, right? So that is the first step. We loaded it. Now once we loaded it, which means now we are ready ready to connect any database of this type. Now let us say if I'm using my SQL server, my SQL jar here, which means let us say this is my SQL server, right, which means I can connect to this. Now that is our second step. The second step is to get the connection between your database, right, the connection between your database and your jar file here. Right, now how can we get that is the question. Now how can we get that is, as I said, every database will be in one server, right, in one server. Now whenever we talk about a server, right, which means it will have some domain name like xyz.com, and it will have some port, let us say 8051 something, and database will have a DB name, right, and username and password. So using all these parameters, I said we'll be creating a connection here. Now let us see how we can create a connection. In order to create a connection, so first step what we have seen is driver manager is ready. So once the driver manager is ready, then we'll create something called connection. Now again you can see in this program the connection is nothing but a class. Again the connection is nothing but a connection class again, but you can see here from where we are getting the connection is through the driver manager. Once we load a driver, which means driver manager is ready, right? So once the driver manager is ready, then you can just say driver manager dot get connection. If you can see here, we have said something called get connection, right? We get the connection from driver manager, where you have to mention all your server port, DB name and all. Now you can see here, so I said driver manager dot get connection. You can see I've given my path. So in my local path I've given my server name, because in my server is nothing but a local host. Now what is local host? You will understand this when we come to the web application development part. Local host is nothing but if your server is in your machine where you are actually coding your program, right, it will be there itself. That is nothing but your local host. Fine. And then this is something which is a database name, my database instance name as such, right? Database instance, why I'm calling database instance is, now here you can see I said in my server, right, in my server I have one database, right? I have one database here, one database. In the same way I can have many databases in the same server. Let us say this is server, this server is like the complete server, which is xyz.com. let us say I have one more database. Now the question is, how can we differentiate these two, right? We know the server name, which is xyz.com, we know the port and all. Now again, whenever you have this is possible in a same server, you can keep an instance of same server, SQL server 1 and SQL server 2, both are SQL servers. Now here the differentiating point is, the first differentiating point is the port, right? If you have a separate database, your port will be different. Let us say it is 8052. This is the first, which means it's a door 1 and it's a door 2, right? In the same address, which means same server, you have two different ports, and this port will be listening to this. That will be your second thing, right? And the third thing is, if your connection is made, right, which is your this port will be listened by this database. This database will have its own name, let us say db2 something, and this will have its own username and password, right? This database name and this will not be same, right? So that is how you give. Let us say if you are giving this server name and this port and this database name and username password, then your app will be connected to this database. That is how we differentiate. That is why we said something called that is what I was talking about, something called your database instance. So this is the instance which I am talking about, and for this instance this is a port. Now this college is nothing but my table, right? Now this college is nothing but my database, This is the instance of database where you can create multiple databases. So these are database. Now let me open up my SQL Server 2. I'll show you that. Okay, it will take some time, let it load, right? And then we can see I just said integrated security 2, right? So integrated security, the last step what we have seen is to give some username and password, right? So here if you know that the application will be in the same server, or if you want the server to take the this is the one, this is the instance name. Let me connect it. Let us see whether it connects, because I have stopped my SQL services. Doesn't matter if it is not connecting. I'll make, I think it won't connect. Yes, it won't connect, because I have started by SQL services, because it will make machine slow actually. I'll show you that in the next class. Okay, so that is my connection string. Now integrated security true. So this is different for different databases. Like if you want to give username and password, yes, you can give. Otherwise what you can do, integrated security is equal to true is nothing but, let us say for each and every machine you will be having NT login, right? Like your network login. If you work in a bigger company, right, you will be having NT logins. Like you can log into your database, right, using that name and password. So let us say for that machine, if you are deploying any SQL server, right, if you say here integrate security true, which means it will take the NT login. If your NT login is same as your database login, which means you don't have to mention your username and password separately. Right, so that is integrated security. Now this is how you define your get connection, where you have seen something called JDBC SQL server. Now this JDBC will be common for all the connection string. So this string is in general called as a connection string, right? It is a connection string, right? This is basically a connection string here. Now with this, what is happening is the driver manager will go to this host, will go to this instance, will go to this database, will go to this port. Using this security measurements, what it will do, it will try to connect the database, whatever database is being reachable, and it will get the connection. The getting the connection is nothing but the pool. Whatever it is being created will be saved in a class or object called your connection object. Now which means your connection is ready. The second step, which is your connection is ready, right? That is how we connect to any database. Fine, understood this? Now the next thing is, now once the connection is ready, which means this pool is ready, the database, now we can do anything with our database, because if the connection is ready, which means database have authenticated us to do some tasks, right? So the task will be, you can get the data, or some inserting data, some updating data, or deleting data. So all these three are, we are talking about something called queries, which are SQL queries, SQL things, right? Or DML, data manipulation language queries, right? Anything. So it depends on the project, whatever project you are getting, right? Or your requirement, right? You will be having different queries to run on, right? The next step is to run a query. Now if you can see here, I have prepared a query, a simple query. So in this database I have a simple table called students. What I am doing is I am preparing a small query to get all the details of students, right? So that is nothing but a creation of a query. I can say query, some create query, right? Now we have created this. Now this is not a big step anyways. This is not a separate step in our architecture, but this step is an embedded step in our statement. But now let us see how this works. Now once you are ready with a query, the immediate step is to get the details of by running this query. Now the question is, how can we run this query? In order to run that query, we have something called statement. Statement here again is something which is retrieved from your get connection or connection object. So this statement I'll show you here. Now you can see here I've created a small statement here, statement is again a class in our java.sql SQL package, right? So this statement, you can see here, I'm using my connection object, and I just said create statement. Create statement is something which is an internal method of your class connection, right? Now if the connection is successful, which means it will move on to the next step and will say connection.create statement, which means we are actually creating a path which is nothing but a statement to run a query. Now let us come back to the statement now here. So statements are, there are different type of statements again we have, right? So in a type of statements we have three types actually. So among the first one is called as a normal statement, which we have just seen, right? So this statement we create using, let us say, connection is con, let us say, right? The connection object which I was talking about, this connection, right? The object, let me take it as con dot, we have said create statement, right? Create statement will create your statement and it will return this here. Now this is the first step, and second type is prepared statement. Now how do we get to this is, we have something called con dot prepared statement, right? But here you have to mention your query here directly. Now what is the difference? I'll explain, right? Now if you try it here, let me just see whether it accepts. Now you can see you have something called prepare statement, right? This prepare statement will give you something called, now let me just mouse over this, or let me just say prepare statement, right? Prepare statement here will give you something called, you can see this prepared statement type, right? So that is what we are getting, prepared statement type, right? So that is what is a next type, which is prepared statement. Now what is the difference between these two? I'll explain. Let me explain one more type. So one more type is callable statement. So this we will be getting using your con dot prepare call with a query. Now here itself you would have seen that prepare call, right? Prepare call will give you something called callable statement. Again, these are same. Now the meaning of everything is to get a statement, but what exactly is the difference between these things is the question, right? Now here, whenever we are talking about statement, right, the statement is something which you are actually creating a barrier, or not a barrier, which you are creating actually a guy like a postman, where you are handing over a query to that guy, to the statement, and whenever you execute it, it will go to the database, using your connection object, right? Through that connection it will go, it will fetch the, it will give the query, execute them and get the details and get back. This is a common thing what statement will be doing. But before that, why do we have these type? Now first thing, statement. The statement is something, if you define it as a normal statement, right, what happens here is, right, the statement, whenever you create a statement, that statement will be a standalone statement. If that is nothing but a static statement, right, it will stay here itself, right? So with just a declaration of statement, it will be doing nothing. It just creates a statement and it will be like a static thing. And now what is prepared statement or callable statement? Prepared statement is something, once you create an object of prepared statement by this way, right, what happens is immediately it will go to the DB, it will keep the query ready with compiled. Anyways, even if you create statement and say execute, it will go to the database. There are two steps. Inside it will first compile the query, it will check whether the query is correct or not, and then it will execute. Anyways, we won't be seeing that is something which is internally happening, right? which is compilation and execution. So what we'll be getting is, once it compiles and executes, we'll be getting the results only. But the only thing is, whenever you create a statement, it won't be in a compiled state, it will be in a normal raw state. But when you create something called prepare statement, it will go to the database immediately and it will compile the query. And even that is the case with the callable statement, which is it will go to the query and it will compile the, again you have to mention your query here anyways, right? It's a mandatory field, query, right? You have to, it will go and keep the things compiled. Now, so where exactly we use this? Now, where do we this statement is, if you have something called static queries. Static queries is nothing but, you can see here I have defined something called select star from students, that's it. So this is something which is static, there is nothing that I am actually making it dynamic. So these type of queries, for these type of queries we use statement for static query statements. Now, why do we use prepare call is, why do we use prepared call or prepared statement is to run both static and dynamic queries. Now what is dynamic here? Let us say when I am saying something called select star from some students, I said something called where student ID or student maybe underscore ID, which is a column, is equal to some let us say I'm just giving it as some dynamic thing, which is int ID is equal to some, let us say this thing, right? I'm substituting into ID here, right? Which means every time there is a scope that my query may change, right? Dynamically my query may change because the change part here is student ID, right? So differently it will be changing. So in those case you may go for prepare call statement, right, where this query will be executed. So that is nothing but your prepare call. Now C, which is the last one, which is callable statement or prepare call. So why do we have this? Now this is there for mainly for two different things, which is store procedures and we have functions. Now if anyone have got knowledge on store procedures and functions, this is something which is completely a database stuff. A store procedure is something, see here what we have done here, we have written our query in my code, right? There is my code, Java code, and we have written the query over here. But what does your store procedure do is, so store procedure is a simple component in any database. In any database you will find a store procedure, and we will be writing the whole query in a database side. That is nothing but a backend side. And what we'll be doing, you'll be giving some name to that store procedure, right? And what we'll be doing is, we will be calling that name of a store procedure from your prepare call. And what it will do, it will take the name, it will go to database, and it will search whether there is a store procedure with that name. If that is there, it will execute there itself. It will execute the query, the store procedure in database, and you give the results, and the statement will get the results back. Now what is the use of that? What is the use of this? Now store procedures are most optimized way of running a query on database. Why? Now here you can see, whenever I write any query, right, let us say I've just written a small query, it won't be this small. Yeah, this can be small in your real time, but queries may be heavy. It can be some 4 to 5 to 6 lines, a bigger query like joins and all. We'll be doing multiple things. At that time, what happens here is, whenever you create a statement and whenever you run that, right, what happens? Your statement is here now, right? The statement will have to carry the whole query string from here to here, which means it has to convert the whole string to some byte buffer, and it is carrying over the network, which means it is carrying the over the network, which means it is using some bandwidth, right? Now let us say you are running that type of queries. I mean, you have 100 different queries you have, which means every time you run, you are actually making the query go to the database, right? You are actually transporting the string to database, running that and getting back. That is what we are doing in a static or dynamic queries. But in stored procedures, what we are doing is we are just sending the name, a simple name of the query, and the query is directly saved in your database. Right? The query which is saved in database is called as a stored procedure. The procedure which you have stored at the side of database, stored procedure. And whenever statement guy takes name to the database, right, the database will pick the corresponding stored procedure. It will run the same way it will be running, and it will give the results. And now there is one more thing here. Whatever stored procedure you are saving in database, right, it will be in a pre-compiled state. Right? Whenever you are writing a stored procedure, you have to compile it first and you have to save. That is how it works. So for running the stored procedure, we will be using prepare call. Right? You can just keep this in mind. And what is a function? Function is again a simple, again it is same as stored procedure, but here what we will be doing is we will not be writing much bigger queries. Function is a normal function which we have, or a normal method which we have already seen in Java, but this function is something which is written on database side. You can write your own functions. Let us say you want to get current date of some student when he joined. Now for that you don't have to write a bigger query, or you don't have to write a bigger stored procedure. You can just write a simple function in database side, and in that function you can just retrieve the day the student joined, because function can also have arguments, and that function name you can use a prepare call statement to call that function. Right? So that is how we use prepare call. And what is stored procedure and functions, you will be getting from a database side. Actually it is all something which is being done at a database side. Right? So that is what we have, three different statements, which is statement, we have prepare statement, and you have something called callable statement. Okay? But basically for medium and small scale things, if you want to write a query from in your code side, right, we will be mostly using, for small things we will be mostly using statements, because even if you create 100 different queries, and if you create prepare call, right, which means you are actually compiling the query in your database side. And if you are going to run this query, fine. If you are not going to run this query, then obviously you are wasting some time to compile the code. But yes, it is true that if you use prepare statement, it will be more optimized, because it will keep your query ready to execute. Right? So that is what is something called how we create statement. And these steps, whatever we are going on, is same for all the databases. There is nothing different. Right? Only difference will be your driver string and your connection string. That's it. And remaining everything will be same across all the JDBC APIs. Fine. So that is your statement, which is your statement. Now once you are ready with the statement, the next step is execute. Until unless you execute, right, your statement the statement will not go to database, will not execute, and will not get it back, right, until you execute it. The next step is something which is executing your query. Now this execute, what it will do, again we will be executing using your statement again. Now you can see here I am executing my query using my statement. Now here you can see the dependencies. You can execute your query using your statement. You can create your statement using your connection. You can create your connection using your driver manager. You can create your driver manager when you load your driver. Everything is interconnected. If one step is missing, right, if I forget creating connection, then what happens to statement? It will never be able to connect. Right? So that is what happens. Right? So that's why in each and every step.
Srinath?
Yeah, Jami?
Yeah. If we are using prepare statement,
yeah,
then we don't have to execute. Is that how it is?
No. Even prepare statement you have to execute. You have to execute even the prepare statement. Yeah. But I said it will keep the query in a compiled state, not an execution state, right? Compilation is different.
So if we are using stored procedure, then
Yeah,
you will be just giving the name of the stored procedure, right?
yeah, you will be giving a name of a stored procedure. Yes.
Okay, and the same thing we have to give in the execute query also.
In execute query, if you are actually prepare statement, right? Prepare one sec. See, in execute, yes, even in that case, you have to prepare statement is there. When I go to prepare statement and see execute, right? Dot execute, we'll be getting direct execute. Okay, because I'm giving my SQL here, right? Right.
Okay.
You can directly execute and get the result.
And then we'll be giving results at rs equal to pstm.execute. Is that how it is?
Yep, yep. You will be executing that. Okay, let me just
Okay.
show you that. That is prepare statement dot execute, right? You can see, okay, this execute is used for mainly, yeah, this is something which is used for store procedure, right? So mostly what it will do, store procedure will write mostly for update or something, right? We won't be getting the details, right? So in those, so now you can see here there is a execute query again, right? So you can see here execute query will give you something called result set, right? Execute query, I'm sorry, I have to use this one, right? You have something called execute query which will give you result set, right? Now you have two things, execute query and execute query with a query again. But as we have already in prepare statement, as we can already give my query directly, right? I don't have to again go for giving a query again, right? That's why here, which means when you create this, it will be in a compiled state, right? Which means when it is not in design time, I'm saying when the program starts running, right? And when it completes this step, which means the compilation is done. And then when you execute, then it will actually execute the query and it will give you the result, right?
Okay.
Okay, perfect. Fine. Sorry, I'll keep this in commented so that when I share, you can just go through this. Okay. And anyways, I won't be sharing this today because I have to. I'll run this query. I'll start my services, my local database services, and I'll run this. I'll show you first how it is running, and then and then I'll show you. Now that is your execute query. So in this execute query, right, which we have seen here, statement dot execute query, right? Now which is until unless your statement is ready, you will never be able to execute a query, right? Because you have to prepare your statement. Now once you execute some query, it will give you 3 different results. Now let us see what are the types of executions you have or execute you have. Under execute, right, again you have again almost you have 3 different types. Again, why I'm talking about 3 different is because you'll be getting 3 different outputs. The first one is execute query, which we were seeing. This execute query is mainly used for select statements. Select in the sense for selecting some data, maybe select star from or select id comma something, where you are actually intended to get some data from database to the Java code. Let us say you want to show something like let us take an example of Gmail, right? Let us say whenever you log into Gmail, right, you want to see all the mails you have, which means the application should trigger the database, should query the database and get the details. So getting details, we use select, which means at that time we will be executing query where we will be getting something called result set. Results, basically results. What is result set? We'll see. We will be basically getting some results in the form of table. Right? Now what is in the form of table is like, if you have a student table, right? If you have a student table, let us say you just said I want select star from table, which means let us say this is your table where you have got some some columns, which is id column, right, name column, right, and let us say joining date, maybe, right, joining date column. Let us say there are 3 records, right, which is 1 2 3 is your id, some xyz is name, and maybe date is maybe 31st something, okay, and you have 2 5 6 and abc and some date 25th maybe, and some 172, right, and ZAB, right, and you have something called 10th. Now this is a simple table which you have in the same way saved in your database. Now whenever you say, let us say this table is a students table, right? Now whenever you say select star from students, right, which means we are actually intended to get the complete set of data in a whole tabular form. The same table will be transported over the network to your result set. So this is something which is the first type, which is execute query. Execute query will give you the complete result, and these results are basically saved in something called result set. This is a direct class. Again, you can see here result set is something which is again a direct class, again inside your SQL, which is the only token to save this is a virtual table being created whenever you run your execute query. Now we cannot create a result set instance. I cannot say new result set. No, I can't do that, because result set is something which is anonymous type. You have to get the result set from executing your query. So these are steps where we get the result. Now this is the first step, and second way of execution is you have something called execute update. Now why do we use execute update is, this is used when you want to update some data. Let us say you want to update student's name, you can use update statement, right? Or if you want to do something called insert, right? Insert is again a type of update, and delete. So for these things you can directly use execute update, because why we use this second step is this will return you something called integer. It will return you int, right? So integer, if it is 0, if it is 1, which means update or insert or delete, whatever query you are using is successful. And if it is throwing 0, which means there is some problem with that. That is nothing but your execute update. Now the third type you have is direct execute, right? This will give you something called boolean type. Now this is something which is used for stored procedures, SPs, right, and other stuffs. And also this can also be used for update, insert, and delete. That is also be done, but mostly we follow these three for different things, right? That is execute query, execute update, and execute. And again, execute can be done only using a statement. Until unless you have a statement, you can't execute anything, right? Statement dot. Now that statement is nothing but this statement, which is the statement you have created, and I'm using statement dot execute query, which will give me some result set, right? And I'm getting the result set here, right? So that is where your all the rows of your data will be retrieved and will be saved as a cache in our local class called result set, right? So that is how we get the results. Now how do we read the results? Now is the next step, right? Because if you are getting an int or boolean, right, that's fine. If you are getting this, it's a single step of execution, right? What is that? If you get boolean, which means yes, I've my stored procedure or other function is successful. Or if it is execute update, you are getting int, right? There what you are checking, okay, if I am updating something, I got a 1, which means yes, my update is successful. There is nothing to process the results. Where is the important thing is in this step. So once you are getting the result, you have to do something called process the results, right? You have to read the data, right? And then you have to do something on it. Let us say you are creating a web page and you want to show all the details on your web page, then obviously we will be going for the result set where you are going for select, right? In that way you can read the data and show. Now in result set, so now we are in result set, right, which will store the data internally as a cache table. Now how can we read this table? Now this table contains, again, this table is something which is like you have something called data map. If you remember in some other languages, in C# or C++, we have understood. So result set is something which is one directional or single directional reading type. Once you read one line, one row, if you go to the next row, right, you won't be able to get back to the previous row. That is how it works. Now here you have two different things, which is your result set is once you get the result set, right, we'll be iterating through the result set to get each and every row. Now let us say this is my row which is saved, which is there are 3 rows. Now how can we iterate is, we have something called next, dot next. This is an internal method of the result set, which is dot next. Now what it will give you is, if you remember our iterator in our core Java, right, the cursor type, which is iterator. In our iterator we have something called has next. Has next will give you whether you have got the data after this, which means the pointer will be always in a starting of your row. It will give whether there is a record after that. In the same way, in our queries, in our result set, we have one token called next. What does this next will give you is, initially your pointer will be at a starting of a record. When you say next, it will go to the next record starting point, and it will give you this row. Now how does it will give us this row? There is no way that you can capture the whole row, but what you can do is, each and everything which is ID, name and date will be saved in a result set internally. And how can we get that is, we have to use this column name. Now you can see here, you have to get the column name, or let us say these columns are nothing but, this is a first column, second column, third column, let us say, right, first, second, third. You can also give the column number here, first number. Now how can we get that is, let us say I'm doing rs.next, which means my result set dot next, which means I've got my first row. When I say when I once say rs.next, which means the first row is being saved in rs. Now where it is being saved is here. You can do something called rs.get. You have so many data types. You have byte, boolean, big decimal and all. Why do you have these many databases, types? Because your column can be of any type. Let us say ID is of type number, your name is of type string, and your date is of type date. So based on that, you can actually use any thing you want. Let us say I want to get int. Int is nothing but my ID. Now here you can see here, there are 2 different things in everything. Either you can give column index or you can give column label. Column index is nothing but, let us say this is 0th index, first index and second index. Or label is nothing but the name of a column, ID, name or date. So it is always recommended to use the name of a column name. Never go for the index of a column. Never go for that. Always give that. Now how can you do that? Let us say I want to get int of my column called ID. So this is how I do. Now when I call this, which means in a first row I'm getting the ID into my, let us say I'm just taking my int or string ID, let us say, right. So to this I'll be storing my ID. Now basically why I've given a string is, all the data types can be mapped to one thing called getString. GetString is something where you can actually map each and every data type. Automatically what it will do, it will convert the label into string, it will convert the value into string, and it will be saved. So in my first row, when I say next, which means my first row 1, 2, 3 XYZ 31 is returned. So how can you read that? The first thing, you have to get string and ID. In the same way, you can say 3 things where your get string is name and get string of your date, right? Your get string of your date. Now here you are saving it in your name, and here you are saving it in your date, which means now my complete first row I have read. This is how you read your data in using your result set, right? Now once you have done with, now you can do anything. You can display this. I've just used to display. Yeah, you can just use direct ID and name here to display, right? Now once you get back again to the same thing, which is let us say the first row is done. Now it gets back to, and we'll say next, which means it will go to the next row. Now what is the next row? Is the third row. It will go to the starting of third row, and the second row will be returned. And when the second row will be returned, right, all your details which is ID, name and date will be again rewinded, right? This RS inside this result set, the current row will be changed. Then when I say ID, name, date, you will be getting the details of your second row, and the same thing loops on. This is how we can use something called result set to read data in this way. Now again, as I said, you have different different things here. You have int, you have decimal, you have something called blob. You have also have blob. What is blob? I'll be explaining you. I'll explain this blob thing tomorrow, right? And you have something called get date. If you know that the column is direct thing, you know you will be getting that. You have glob. What is glob and blob? I'll explain it, because this is something which is used for the bigger data, right? Sorry. So that is how we can retrieve. But this pattern of reading data will be same. It will never change. Your result set, you have to iterate it, and you have to get the details, each and every detail, and then you can use this detail to show or to do some processing, right? So that is how we go for processing of a data, right? So that is something which is a result set here, right? That is your process your result, which is result set. We have seen boolean, we have seen something called int, right? So that is how you process your set. Now we'll see much of result set, because we have some more things in your result set, right? So whatever we are touching upon here is JDBC 2.0. Anyways, currently you have JDBC 6 as stable version. You also have 7, but we'll be learning JDBC 6. We will see what actually happens in a result set on different versions of JDBC tomorrow, right? Fine. Then let's.
Sweet.
Yeah, Johnny.
Yeah. When it comes to multiple result cell, do we have a different method or something?
What is that? When we come to multiple
result sets, I mean, in some cases there are multiple result sets, right?
Multiple result sets in the sense you will be running different results, right? Different queries.
I mean, let's say if you're calling a stored procedure and if it returns more than one result set, so we have a different method.
See, it won't return more than one, right? Because what you are saying is, from using one query, you are saying you are getting multiple tables. Am I right?
Not when you are using a query. When we are using a stored procedure, it can give back multiple result sets also, right?
I mean, it will give back multiple result sets in the sense. What is there in the result set?
Let's say, let's say in one result set there will be like the data from one table, the another one will have another.
No. You won't see like using one query or one stored procedure, right? You will get only one table always, right? You can't get multiple tables in.
No. Not tables, it's result sets actually.
Yeah,
it can.
Yeah, but here result set is nothing but your virtual table, right? It is simple, which is like, whenever I'm saying this, let's start from something, which means I'm getting something. Now, if I take an example of your example, let us say you said in your stored procedure you are actually clubbing different tables, right? Some data from this table, some data from that table, and some data from third table. What you are doing is, if you are actually getting from multiple tables, you are actually making those data into one set, and you are returning it out to result set. It is not like you are actually, yes, it is true that you can actually access multiple tables in the same query. I can just say select star from students, comma, I can say teachers. I can do that. Now, which means
yes, Srinath, I mean, we can do that, like, we can get data from multiple tables, and also we can have, a stored procedure can return multiple result sets also. And maybe there might be some little method or something to do that. The reason why I'm saying is like, this is what I do on a day-to-day basis, so I don't know the Java part, but when it comes to result set, I know, we are sending it like multiple result sets. So that's what
okay, so if it is giving you multiple result set, which means, is it a different tables being combined and you're giving as a single result set? Is that what you're saying?
Let's say I'm just giving an example, like, you have a stored procedure which deals with the client, and one result set will give all the client's name, address, and everything. Another result set will give all the, let's say account information, like its amount and all the things, so like that. So just giving an example. So yeah, maybe like there might be some other method to get that, and I was just curious to know, but this is the basics. This is fine. Yeah.
Okay, let me check out that. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
Just curious.
Yeah, definitely. I'll get back to you on that. Okay, sure. Okay, let me just find out with my.
So you'll be sharing this class, right? I mean this.